Welcome back to the Ed Morrissey Show. Today is Tuesday, January 12th, 2021. A day that will live in, I don't know.
It's Tuesday? I've been
It's
sitting
Tuesday.
here since Thursday.
Well, you're on the beach, so you're allowed to do that. Jeff Donitz from lidblog.com is our co-host today because, of course, we aren't going to have Andrew Malcolm on today. He is in the middle of transferring his flag to other to parts unknown or parts best left undescribed. I'll let Andrew describe where he's going to land, but he's in the middle of transitioning to some other location inside the United States, and we won't have him here for probably at least a couple more weeks, maybe even into February before we actually see Andrew come back. Great to have you with us. And by the way, we are operating the chat rooms in both the Facebook side and in the traditional Ed Morrissey Show chat room, which I'm going to put up in the comments here in just a moment on the Facebook side, so people can have the link for that. You can be in both places at the same time. Jeff does it all the time. So does Bob Visco. Dave Boxstans wonders, how is Generalissimo Dwayne? Last I heard, he was improving, and that was I think yesterday. Actually, we exchanged texts, and he says he's improving. His wife is improving, but it's taking a while. And I think Salem has a 2-week quarantine policy, so he can't go into the studio until he's cleared that. Which means I don't know that he's going to be doing...
He doesn't want to go into the studio after the Steeler Brown game because you will be bragging too much.
Yeah. You notice I haven't mentioned that too much.
Well, you haven't followed football all year.
I haven't. I didn't watch the game, but I heard that the Steelers were down 28-0 in the first quarter.
Yeah. Do you know what? You know why? Because they've been watching Jet films.
They must have been.
Right?
That's either that or Browns films from 2 years ago. I have no idea what happened to the Steelers. I have no answer for that. I am just glad that Hugh did not tag me in any of his tweets on the Steelers. Although I may not have seen it. Maybe he didn't. I just didn't see it because my mentions are just doing this these days. Thanks to, various things. But... first off, I don't know if you've been paying any attention to this. This is just in the last hour, the FBI and the Department of Justice doing a press conference about the investigations into what happened on Capitol Hill last week. And they are looking to prosecute serious felonies for sedition, which I think is the appropriate charge in this case. These are people who broke into Congress to try to stop Congress from conducting its business and finalizing an election, which to me sounds pretty seditious.
Anybody who broke into the Capitol, I think they should put them away for as long as they can.
Yeah, I agree.
Have a cam looking at the cells so people could see what happens when you try to do violence in a protest.
Yes. I think that this all should be televised. I think that the people who are arrested under these charges, like Jake and Gilly, the MAGA Wonder Shaman, the all organic MAGA Wonder Shaman, should be held up for public ridicule at every possible opportunity. And I agree with you. I think that this is something that you do to make sure examples are set for the future. And this is so disgusting.
Sadly, it's something they didn't do with the summer riots.
True, although there's a jurisdiction point here too, right? I mean, there may have been some federal jurisdiction on that, depending on how much interstate conspiring there was to do, but there's no doubt that the FBI has jurisdiction on Capitol Hill.
Oh, absolutely.
That's a federal case. If you're going to do that on Capitol Hill, congratulations, you've just won yourself federal jurisdiction.
But the DC prosecutor, after charges were made after the DC riot, he dropped the charges.
Yeah, and I think that there's room for there's plenty of room here for debate over that. But I will say that what happened on Capitol Hill was different, right?
Yeah, well, it was disgusting because you don't revolt against your own government. I mean,
Right.
and
while you're calling yourself a patriot, by the way.
well, then, but also what they did was they stopped what they wanted Congress to do, which was look at the electoral votes. And what they did is they pretty much ruined the conservative movement because it led to the Parler thing, it led to Twitter, it led to everybody hating conservatives.
Yep. Well, MAGA.
MAGA. But wait a second, though. It is not just MAGA because
No, it won't be. There's going to. I mean, it's going to go beyond that. But that's the reason why. It's one of the reasons why I said, I'm just simply not going to participate in this party because this party doesn't stand up. This party did not stand up for the institutions that make us a free democratic republic. They didn't.
But I know people who didn't write about stop the steal. I mean, that didn't support the rioters. They happened to be Trump supporters, and they got kicked off.
Yeah. No, I know. I mean,
beyond that,
there's broad brushes that are being applied here.
Right.
All I can do is take care of my own business.
That's right.
That's the reason why I wrote that post yesterday. Before I get into that, though, I got to tell you, I've been running around today because the First Mate has some health issues that we're trying to address right now. Nothing serious, hopefully, but just your
poo-poo, as my mother would say.
Just stuff. Yeah.
And
so I got back and I got this. I got this email, which was a forwarded email from a forwarded email. So I'm not even sure where this originated. But let me read you just a little bit of this, okay? Because this is apparently what's going on in the QAnon circles. What I'm about to disclose is the most important post you'll read before the inauguration. Q will not post here again, at least not for a while. The operation is ongoing, but must run silent at this point. Once we wind down, you will not hear from Q again. Don't let this worry or upset you. We're in perhaps the most critical juncture of American history. POTUS is fully aware of the gravity of this time period. We have prepared from before 2015 for this exact moment. Let's see, let's see. Let me skip down here for just a bit. I mean, there's all sorts of crazy in this here. We're in the most dangerous phase, and the stakes could not be higher. Military takedowns and arrests begin this weekend and will continue forward for the next 13 days and nights. Some international raids have already started. Italy has also been found complicit in our election fraud. Everybody will be getting emergency alerts on their phones, TVs, radio, and internet. It will override all other broadcasts and could last for several hours at a time. Do not be scared of what's coming, as it is for the safety of our nation for this to unfold. Do not travel to any large cities, especially Philadelphia. Who wants to travel to Philadelphia? That's what I want to know.
Well, you don't want to
for the rest of the month. Military operations will be taking place in many of the major corrupt cities. I mean, and so on and so on and so on. This is freaking insane.
Yes.
And what
this is Lin Wood type insane.
This is Lin Wood type of insanity, and it's the Republicans playing footsie with these guys by trying to pander to them with a completely illegitimate attempt to reject certified electors from a national election. That's creating this. I mean, people like Kevin McCarthy, Steve Scalise, Ted Cruz, Josh Hawley know better. Even if you think that Donald Trump believes in this stuff, those guys know better, and they're pandering in order to suck up to the crazies. And this is what you get. This is what you get when you suck up to the crazies. Is you get what happened on Capitol Hill.
Yes, but what they were trying to do was a perfectly legal constitutional process, which was doomed from the start.
No, it's not, actually. Congress doesn't have the authority. This is the thing
I know, but
Congress does not have the authority to reject certified electors from the states if there's no competing slate of electors. Right. They don't have the authority to do what they did.
But they were doing it calmly. It wasn't a crazy. I mean, it was a crazy thing. It was a waste of time, to be honest. It was just as much as a waste of time as the impeachment they're doing now. Okay, but it was a waste of time. But it wasn't something that would make people, I don't think, that would make people jump into the Capitol, try to climb up the walls.
No, I mean, again, this is the reason why. I mean, I laid this out better in my post, so I apologize.
Your post was brilliant, okay?
But
and what people have to understand, if I could just say this.
Yeah, go ahead.
What you were doing is rejecting what the party was doing. You weren't rejecting the conservative values that you've been talking about all your life.
No.
You were rejecting the craziness. That's what you were rejecting. And the fact that they weren't screaming, hey, this is idiocy. Let's go back to normal.
It's not even that. It's not even the idiocy. It's that what they're doing is destroying the institutions that conservatives are supposed to be conserving. Yes. And what the reason why I underscore this is because these guys, these Republicans, especially the leadership, were feeding into the idea that Congress had the authority to do this in the first place. They were feeding into the idea that Mike Pence had the authority to ignore electors. And that's the reason why this crowd got so charged up and was trying to lynch Mike Pence and accusing him of treason, is because he was refusing to do something he doesn't have the authority to do in the first place.
Well,
and people like Ted Cruz and Josh Hawley should have made that really clear.
When I wrote that Mike Pence did the right thing constitutionally, and I not only support it, but I was proud of him. I had a crowd outside of my house with torches and pitchforks, like the Frankenstein movie. I mean, yeah, but you know what I'm saying. And
they were worried that you was following in your grandfather's footsteps.
Well, actually, my grandfather escaped from the Cossacks in Odessa, but
I know I'm joking around with the pitchforks and and
but
torches.
That's another thing that we do too much. We expect purity. Okay, we expect everybody to agree with everybody, and what Pence did was right. I don't care if Trump thought it was wrong. What he did was right. And the sick thing is, the one thing I could say that was wrong was Lynn Wood saying, let's hang him.
Well, so he wasn't the only one. I mean, people were bringing zip ties to the to Congress. They were looking to find members of Congress to either kidnap or kill. And they were chanting, hang Mike Pence. And now Rod Allen just bailed out of here because he said, well, very few give QAnon any traction. You guys are off base. All that stuff that was happening out there was based off of QAnon. I mean, that was the stuff that people were responding to out on Capitol Hill.
Well, I have to tell you something. That's what they said in the press conference, or people around the press conference. But, how many times have I asked you, what the hell is QAnon?
No, I'm just talking about the people who actually showed up down there to riot. The rest of us know that this is nonsense.
Well, I don't even know. I mean, all I know is that they're anti-Semitic and they like frogs or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, QAnon is. I mean, I'll give you a thumbnail of it as much as I understand it, which is not much, but it's supposedly some guy who is in the middle of the intel community who's got all the information on everybody, and he's been sending it out in secret to Trump supporters, and that's what prompted this email that I got from a friend of mine. I mean, this is just, I got back from our medical process today.
Right.
I'm getting ready for the show, and literally the first email I see is this one, and I'm reading through it. I'm going, this is what these guys in the FBI and the Department of Justice are talking about today. It's this stuff right here that they're talking about, and it has gotten very, very toxic. And Republican leadership has been playing footsie with this for way too long. And what happened on January 6th, even apart from the riot, what Congress did on January 6th was invalid, was wrong, and it was corrosive and destructive. And until Republican leadership changes and gets back to conservative values, I have no reason to participate in a party that's as nihilistic as stuff on the left. At least they're honest. They don't want these institutions. They want to drag them down because they want direct democracy and mob rule. We're supposed to be the party that opposes that.
That whole thing that the Republicans allowed to happen, it canceled my Wednesday night Chicago shows.
Yeah, that sucks.
Fortunately,
I have Discovery Plus, so I was able to go back and watch all the stuff I missed on Wednesday. Discovery Plus is awesome. They're not paying me to say that. I just like Discovery Plus. So there you go.
I do too.
All right. So let's talk a little bit about what you've got on your thing.
Well, I'm scared. I really am scared. And I'm not scared about riots and things like that. And folks, this might sound crazy, but if you have I know they're planning to do a lot of demonstrations next week on the inauguration day in a lot of states. If you know anybody who does it and plans to do anything violent, please talk them out of it, because it's wrong. The demonstrations, if it's a quiet, peaceful demonstration, that's fine. That's all America. But once you cross that line, it's not America. It's not conservative. And folks, it's not MAGA. I mean, MAGA we supposedly supports law and order. That's not law and order.
No.
But I wrote something yesterday. Actually, I published something of someone else's that I edited and changed. There is so much of an effort to shut people up. And I find it scary. And you know this, 3 weeks before the election, Facebook put me in jail until after the election, and about 30 other people I know, all bloggers. Okay, it had to happen because of our politics. Because none of us that I know were, hey, let's do something violent. But even more than that, okay, I think that by shutting people up, one of the big causes in my mind of last Wednesday was that people didn't feel that they had an opportunity to voice their complaints. They didn't voice it the way they're supposed to. But by shutting more people up, they're going to build the frustration and make it.
And I agree with you. I mean, I think this move to deplatform is really a bad idea. Now, the only thing that I can think of that might change my mind for just only on a very temporary basis is the FBI might have come to him and said, we need to interrupt the comms loop for these guys so that we can track these guys down. But on the other hand, it's easier. I mean, just as as a layman looking at investigations, I think it'd be easier to leave the comm loops up so you can trace them all the way out. I actually think that taking everybody off of Twitter and Facebook and deplatforming Parler, which I think the deplatforming of Parler, I think, is a huge problem because of the manner in which it was done, and because it really speaks to big tech issues. We're going to talk a little bit with AJ about that. In fact, the three of us will talk a little bit with AJ Kaufman when he gets on here. I mean, there are serious questions being raised about antitrust, about consolidation of economic power and access that I think are being raised in the wake of these things. Now, I think that those right now are secondary issues, but they're not going to stay secondary issues for long.
What about the fact that a lot of the Parler information was hacked and people have all the information?
Yeah, I remember, I was on Parler, so they've got, if it was hacked, they've got my information too, but probably nothing you couldn't find by going someplace else.
Well, I haven't published anything on there that I didn't do on Twitter or Facebook.
Well, there's some identification data.
Because you got to check. So do I.
Yeah. So I've been dealing with those potential issues for about a decade now. So maybe a little over a decade now. So I'm, yeah.
But you know what the worst part about all this is? At least for me, as someone who's trying to report, I don't know what's true and what's not. I hear so much stuff that I ignore because, it can't be. But maybe it can be. I mean, it's really weird stuff. Like someone said that the hackers, whoever they are going through all the Parler information. They're trying to see who supported the last Wednesday, and getting their names and information so they can attack them. That's
Yeah,
scary, but I don't know
it
it's
is.
true.
It is. By the way, William Aiello in the Facebook side, that there's he's complaining about a double standard. Be on the left and incite trouble or express hatred, no action is taken. Doing the same thing on the right, do exactly the same, and there's a mob of protest, condemnation, prosecution. They were prosecuting people for the Minneapolis riots. The Department of Justice actually filed federal cases.
Yep.
The Department of Justice was deputizing members of the local police departments in other cities so that they can bring federal cases where local DAs weren't doing that. There's a jurisdiction difference between these things that makes a great deal of difference. But where there was federal jurisdiction, the Department of Justice actually was prosecuting these people. They've prosecuted they've at least charged 3 people, I believe, with the burning of the 3rd precinct in Minneapolis. Those stories are out there. They may not be getting a ton of coverage, but they're out there. They did get coverage. I mean, I know about them because I read about it in Minneapolis Star Tribune and on the wire services. It's not that these people are being left off with no consequences whatsoever. Yep. But if you're stupid enough, part of the issue is that everybody was masked up in Minneapolis. The people who were smashing their way into Capitol Hill to interrupt congressional business to formalize the results of an election, which is seditious, did so while posing for pictures and putting up selfies and videos.
Well, that's really stupid. But
I mean, I'm sorry, but if you're going to do that, don't be surprised if the FBI starts following. If you're trotting off with Nancy Pelosi's lectern and doing a Heisman pose on the way out.
Selfie of what you're doing.
I mean, you almost have to be prosecuted for criminal stupidity at that point. If you're Jake Angeli, the all-organic MAGA wonder shaman, and you're there with your horns on and your face painted, and you're standing at the speaker's position in the well of the House, I for one don't think you should be complaining about the fact that you don't get organic food in the jail after they find you and charge you.
But William, if you have time, go to my website. I posted something on Sunday called "If They Really Want to Be Consistent and Get Rid of Hate Speech, Then They Should Ban Al Sharpton from their platforms." Okay.
Yep.
Personally, I don't think they should ban anybody unless they're sending pictures of sex with little kids. I mean, that, yes. Or if they're talking about, I'm going to shoot someone tomorrow. But be consistent.
Rob N on the Chatisar side, by the way, and feel free to be in both places at the same time, folks. Great to have you all with us, and AJ Kaufman will be here in just a moment from alphanewsmn.com. He points out that McConnell's pre-riot speech didn't get nearly the attention it should have. McConnell actually gave a great speech.
Really?
Well, he was trying to tell his fellow Republicans, don't challenge the electors. That's not our job. Our job is simply to count them and to formalize this process. And it was right after that. And that speech actually kind of started to get some traction, but it was right after that the people started breaking into the Capitol building and they got chased out. So it didn't get as much attention as it should have, but it was actually a very good speech. It's Rob Nappel, NZ Bear. Remember Rob?
Hey, Rob.
Hey, Rob. I didn't realize that's who it was. If you are, Rob is one of the OG bloggers, man. Rob used to, and I am meaning this literally. Rob used to set the whole sphere of the blogosphere. He was the guy who mapped the blogosphere back in the day. So it's great to have him in the traditional Ed Morrissey Show chat room. And great to have you with us, Rob. And great to have us have with us as well AJ Kaufman from alphanewsmn.com. And I've been tweeting his stuff out and chatting up AJ for quite some time. Welcome to the show, sir.
Hey, it's great to be here with the undisputed grandmaster of the Sistine selfie. Did I get that right?
You did. You did. You've done your homework, sir. This is I am very impressed. You have done your homework.
You know, I'm very jealous of that, AJ, because he goes to Israel when there's a conference there. So I should get to go to the Vatican. Don't you think so?
I think that's a fair exchange. Yeah.
Yeah, well.
Oh, well, you know, what can I say? In fact, I actually got, every once in a while, when somebody wants to try to dunk on me, they'll say, didn't you know that you're not supposed to take pictures when you're in the Sistine Chapel, and aren't you ashamed of yourself? And I always remind them, you know, I was there as a member of the media, and they asked us to go in there and take pictures, and that's the reason why the lights were on, because I was there covering the conclave.
And it's beautiful.
Oh, man, I'll tell you, I love taking those pictures. All right, AJ, your first time on the Ed Morrissey Show, so welcome here. We're going to do a little roundtable stuff here, and people who are watching this, you'll see the speaker on the screen as we're talking. First off, AJ, let me go ahead and just let you introduce yourself first.
Well, I write for Alpha News as a columnist. I write about 2 or 3 columns per week, at least I try to, on a variety of topics, anything from foreign policy to economics, social, cultural matters, education. I was a former teacher in Los Angeles, and I've also been a historian in Indiana, and now I've been up here in Minnesota for almost 8 years, up about an hour north of Minneapolis, in the more conservative part of the state.
Which is anything that's outside the Twin Cities. All right, AJ, you originally you were in California. I noticed on your bio, which is on in our show post, that you wrote for the Orange County Register. You know, I'm originally from that part of the country, and I grew up reading this what was then known as the Santa Ana Register. So tell us a little bit about your time in Southern California.
Well, I grew up in San Diego. I went to college near Los Angeles. I wound up teaching in urban Los Angeles for about 4 years. And during that time, I started writing for the Orange County Register because that was the only conservative libertarian paper maybe in the state, but certainly in the whole region. And I started writing about educational reform with a colleague of mine who also is no longer teaching, who also works in the conservative media. And, that led to a little bit of blackballing from the other staff and led to my exit from Los Angeles. But I probably got about half a dozen published before I left California, and then another 10 or 12 in the last couple of years that followed, and moved to the East Coast. And then eventually with my wife, we moved to the Midwest and wound up in Minnesota. And I've also written a little bit for the Star Tribune, St. Cloud Times, Pioneer Press, and also submitted articles to other papers as well as websites.
Well, like I said, I grew up reading the Santa Ana Register, you young whippersnapper, and yeah, the Orange County Register is actually really, really nice newspaper. They do a good job there. All right, so AJ, and of course, alphanewsmn.com. I have friends, and hopefully AJ's one of them, at Alpha News MN. They do good work. They've done a lot of good work covering the riots here. Being on the street literally and being assaulted on the street literally, robbed literally in covering this. So Alpha News MN is it's a legit news site here in the Twin Cities from a conservative perspective, and they do put their resources on the line. Give us a real quick thumbnail about Alpha News MN, and then we're going to talk about big tech with you and Jeff.
Alpha News has been around for about 5 years. We have a handful of columnists. We publish at least 3 or 4 original news stories every day, mostly dealing with Minnesota, sometimes on the scene, sometimes just taking news that we've heard and putting into an article. Usually my column is up there with maybe 1 or 2 other of our writers, sometimes a syndicated person, certainly conservative leaning, somewhat populist leaning. I think we have good video. During the riots, we had videos that were getting millions of hits. We have a couple of young reporters in the Twin Cities that are able to get those for us. And we've been growing. We're growing to well over 500,000, and they can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's well over 500,000 page views per week.
Wow, that's great. All right. Finally, before we move on to big tech, you got any dirt on Anthony Gakowski that you can pass along?
I communicate with Anthony daily, but I've never met him in person. So you probably, I know you know Anthony, and maybe he's watching or listening right now. But no, I know his wife just gave birth, so congratulations.
Yeah, they've just had an addition to the family. It's a great family. We're very good friends with Anthony's parents and with the whole family, Anthony included. And but I just wanted to see if you wanted to give us a little inside dirt on Anthony while we were here.
I don't have any to give you. Sorry, Ed. I have nothing.
Darn. All right. So let's talk big tech. I'm going to start with you, AJ. Tell us your perspective on what's going on with big tech in relation to some of the deplatforming issues, and I'm going to toss it back to Jeff after that. We'll try to do a little bit of a roundtable on that.
Well, I'm not on social media myself individually, so I haven't suffered the fate of anything like I heard you guys talking right before I got on. But it does seem, and I don't think it's debatable, that with Silicon Valley having donated so heavily to Joe Biden and to John Ossoff and Raphael Warnock in the recent Georgia races, that they are feeling emboldened. And that's I think that's how I started my article today, that whether or not this has been in the works for years or they just thought of it, in the last few months, but they don't have anyone really, I think, that's going to challenge them in some of their edicts and decisions that they're pushing forward toward Parler, toward conservative websites, conservative individuals. There could be lawsuits put against them, and maybe there can be a competitor, but Amazon Web Services is so large. And I'm not a tech guy, but I understand how it works. And, if Parler can't get on Amazon Web Services, they're kind of out of luck or getting the App Store. So I have a problem with it, obviously. I also don't think the president should have been banned. I think we know they let people like the Ayatollah and Louis Farrakhan and the Chinese communists say whatever they want if it's in the public interest. I believe that's the term they use. And I don't think that, I wouldn't be for banning them either, frankly. But the president of the United States, whether or not he incited a riot shouldn't be banned. I think Angela Merkel agreed. The president of Mexico agreed. I think even some of the ACLU's liberal lawyers agreed. So what does that mean? And on the other hand, is there hypocrisy with, companies, especially like Google, who have done work for China to enable them to censor speech and monitor the internet, not to mention the NBA and Nike and everyone else. So right, yeah. I'll leave it at that.
Jeff, I share AJ's concerns. We started talking about this just a little bit before AJ came in. You've got some posts up about the big tech stuff. I've talked a little bit about it too, in terms of what's going on with Parler and Amazon. That to me is the most disturbing. I mean, it's one thing for Twitter to say, well, we don't want these people on our platform. Hey, it's their platform. I'm not crazy about that, but that's sort of their thing. But deplatforming an entire platform, if you will.
That is restraint of trade. The problem is that's really I don't know if I've never heard of a private lawsuit being able to prove that. Usually, isn't it a federal lawsuit? And
no. You can do that, but you have to show monopolistic behavior. Right. And the problem is for Amazon is all this stuff happened at the same time. Google right. took them out of their Play Store, Apple took them out of their App Store, and Amazon deplatformed them, and it was all at the same time. And these are your three big tech platforms.
Right after Trump was kicked off of Twitter and was about to announce he was going on to Parler. I mean, I'm not saying that was the motivation, but it's a hell of a coincidence. But the other interesting coincidence, if you remember, do you remember in 2018 during the summer there was the massive Facebook purge where they got rid of like a couple of hundred conservative sites just before the midterm? Again, I'm not saying it's the rationale, but when you put this together with what happened just before the election that I told you before, it just, I don't know. It seems like an interesting coincidence. I can't prove it. It's just that like I say, coincidences happen.
Well, I think that that there are. I mean, first off, we're going to have to see these cases come through. I want to talk about the larger issue here, though, which is something that conservatives have not been good at addressing, which is the the decades of laissez-faire treatment of consolidations in lots of different industries. That includes the communications industry. I'm going to throw this to AJ here first, and I'll get back to you, Jeff, because I don't like you.
Okay. It's because I'm Jewish, isn't it?
It's because you're Jewish. That's right. There you go. You've
joined the club.
There you go. I'm outnumbered here. So there you go. At any rate, the conservatives have been loath to enforce antitrust issues, and I've been talking about this for quite some time. That what they fail to understand is you don't get to small government without dealing with the consolidation in the private sector, because putting more and more power into fewer and fewer hands has political implications as well as economic implications. AJ, what are your thoughts on that? And is that where we really need to start in dealing with these big tech issues?
That's been the debate. You have, a libertarian side of the party that would be reticent to do that. Mm-hmm. You have a more populist side that's not afraid of using government as a tool, led by Josh Hawley, although he's got some other issues now after last week.
Yeah.
But a Tucker Carlson or a Laura Ingraham type on the air versus a more libertarian. It's a big discussion. I've listened to, when I was driving down to Georgia, I covered the elections. I heard a couple of podcasts from Dan Crenshaw, who's a brilliant guy, and his book he wrote earlier this year is excellent.
Yep.
He had two people on back to back on podcast. One from a libertarian think tank. It wasn't Cato, but it was another one who was arguing against doing anything. Said Section 230 is fine, and we'll win somehow. I don't remember the exact argument he made. And then he had someone else on that said the exact opposite, and Crenshaw was left in the middle trying to decide where he fits in as a conservative. So you can every antitrust lawyer I know is a Democrat, a proud liberal Democrat. So that right there gets to your point about whether or not conservatives have any way to get into that industry. You can call for RICO investigations, like I think Representative Nunes did on Sunday. You can inform the public of what's going on, but their rules are there, and it's up to us to either abide by them and maybe get shut out, or change them. And it just abandoning conservative principles, abandoning quote unquote conservative principles may be necessary.
This leads me into a whole other discussion about economics. This goes back to Reagan, by the way. I mean, the consolidations go back to Reagan. And in part, and I'm not knocking Reagan, because Reagan, I still think is the greatest president in my lifetime. There you go. But Reagan's treatment of consolidations was very much laissez-faire. And that, I think I first became really cognizant of that in the defense industry, because there became fewer and fewer prime contractors available. And all these companies were swallowing each other up. And, my dad likes to point out with some amusement that he is getting his pension from a company he never worked for. He's getting it from Boeing. And he's never ever worked for Boeing in his entire life, but that's where his pension's coming from. In part because all these companies ate themselves. And so now you're left with Northrop Grumman, Lockheed, and Boeing. And that's basically it for top-level prime contracting in the aerospace industry, which is not healthy. Now, of course, you got Elon Musk, who kind of opened up his own shop, which was good. But I'm wondering if we shouldn't, as conservatives, be looking more at a distributist model for economics rather than a distributist as a form of capitalist economy, but one that sort of precludes acquisitions at really almost at a granular level. I mean, it depends on how you apply this. It's a distributist model that actually led to that first antitrust, Sherman Act and that sort of thing. That was sort of part of the impulse for that. But I'm not sure you can peel off enough people to read G.K. Chesterton and Hilaire Belloc in order to get people to understand it, let alone let alone try to champion it. But do we really, conservatives, do we really need to start thinking about about reforming capitalism in such a manner that that it keeps Wall Street from gobbling up Main Street? I guess is it's an overly simplistic way of putting it. We'll start with Jeff.
Well, before I did this, I was in the publishing industry for a long time, in the advertising industry. By the time I left, there was one company that controlled 98% of the magazine newsstands, and another company that controlled 98% of the printing business. Okay, and the only thing that saved the that stopped those monopolies was the internet, because it killed the magazine industry. But yeah, I saw it happening. Okay, and it almost killed the business that I was involved in. It's a fine line. I mean, Ed, I keep going back. Do you change 230 or do you do antitrust? They're both stupid in my mind, or they're both great. They get rid of 230, you can't have a new platform. But antitrust goes against it. But they have to somehow evaluate when it screws the consumer, when it kills the capitalist marketplace.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's I think that's the issue, right?
Right. And
AJ?
I think when it kills free trade, well, then guess what? Then you got to do antitrust. You got to do it because you're promoting free trade. But the rules got to be so set that people know what the goals are, what they have to stay away from, and then people don't do it politically. Like, God forbid, people would do business decisions politically, like Twitter and Facebook. But anyway, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It has to be standard rules so people know what they have to avoid.
Well, the problem is that there's really no codification as to what
Right.
what is big enough but not too big, sort of thing. AJ, I'm hand it back to you here. At least should we start thinking about those issues when we're seeing the political impact that having all of this power in the hands of 3 companies, 4 if you count Facebook, although they don't have anything to do with Parler. I mean, isn't that sort of a wake-up call to say, look, there's just too much political power, not authority. It's different. It's actually a different issue. Being placed in the hands of a very few people. That, to me, this moment is kind of a wake-up call for that.
Yeah, I mean, the Republican Party, has been the party allegedly of big business for my entire life, and it's still coined as such, even though I would vehemently disagree. When you look at big tech, you look at the sports leagues, you look at most corporations, if they're not outright liberal, they're politically correct to a point that they will always side with the politically correct left-leaning talking point, including even in the last day or two by, no longer supporting Republican candidates or no longer supporting the president because of, politics, essentially, vis-a-vis the riots last week. So you have to find out, who the leader of the party is, who emerges is going to be the important part, because, there are some Republicans who are, I take Marco Rubio, who's trying to push a common good capitalism, which is sort of a mix of what the Josh Hawley crowd and what the more establishment crowd would push. Ted Cruz tries that, but he often fails because he tries to be on both sides and appeal to everyone, it seems like.
Yeah.
And last week was another example. So I think the parties have switched in that sense, even on free trade. We talked about it. And Trump's populism has caused that, for better or worse. And the big tech has responded for better or more likely worse. So, I think just to wait and see. But I do believe that whoever emerges as the leader of the party, McConnell's going to be the Senate leader and McCarthy's going to be the House leader, but they're not the leader in terms of individual running for president, what have you. It's going to hopefully be someone younger, I think. And I'm kind of excited to see where the party goes, or at least interested, even though we're at a low point right now, having lost all 3 branches in 4 years.
Well, and having lost a lot of credibility on January 6th, too, for that matter. But yeah, for what it's worth, I don't think McCarthy survives as a party leader after this. I think that, or at least he shouldn't. I think that what's been gone on especially over the last few weeks, has thoroughly discredited him as a party leader. And Scalise too. And I like Scalise. I kind of like McCarthy, but those guys got to go.
You think the story about him saying, "Okay, it's over, move on," was true?
No.
Neither did I.
I don't buy that for a minute. Did you buy that, AJ?
Not really. No, there's a lot of stories attributed that I wonder about, both to him, to Trump, to Pence. I think McConnell has behaved in the most adult fashion of any of the. Well, I think Pence has, actually, to be honest, behaved in the most adult manner. And McConnell would be second, and we can maybe talk about his speech and the future of the party a little more, as we go along. But
yeah. Well, let's talk about McConnell's speech. We brought it up. I think it was just before you came on, AJ. So, Jeff, if you don't mind hanging out, we can just keep doing this as a three-way conversation. You guys are both good with that?
Wonderful.
AJ, do you want me to kick Jeff off? Because I can do that for you.
No, we're good. I'm good.
I have the power. This is what happens when you consolidate power into too few hands, like these two hands right here. I can.
Be careful with that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I am an angry and vengeful god in my own little universe, AJ. So
I didn't know that. I didn't.
See, these are the things you learn by coming on the Ed Morrissey Show.
That didn't come out at the GOP dinner where you spoke a few years ago.
No, it didn't. I managed to control it during those periods of time. But here I am my own demigod. No, that's not true. All right. Now let's talk about McConnell's speech, because it did come up earlier. We mentioned, I think it was right before you came on here. The speech that he gave right before the rioters broke into the chamber was actually a very impressive speech. And I think he made it a very impassioned defense of institutions as the bulwarks of liberty. Unfortunately, it's been very much overshadowed by the events that followed immediately after. Tell us a little bit about your thoughts on McConnell's speech and on his leadership in general over the last couple of months.
I'm a McConnell fan. I certainly would criticize him on certain issues. I haven't always agreed with him on who he's endorsed in primaries going back 10, 12 years. But I think capturing the Senate in 2014 was very important and not necessarily expected. I think we held on to the Senate in 16 and 18, and I think many people expected the Republicans to lose 5, 6, 7, maybe 8 seats this past year. And until last week, we had only lost a net of 1. We gained 1 and lost 2. And as far as Georgia goes, I would not blame McConnell at all for what happened in Georgia. I've read some articles at some of the more anti-McConnell, pro-Trump websites. I don't know, American Greatness, some of those places that want him to step down or blame him for losses. I don't see it. I mean, I do understand holding leadership accountable. I would have liked to have seen Pelosi be pushed aside, both not just for ideological reasons, but I think she deserved to lose her job 4 years ago. But McConnell is what you want in a leader. He's not going to run for president. He's not really out for anything for his own personal gain. And his speech was like, he's an institutionalist to the core. And he gave 2 speeches, I think, one during the riots and one that night. So I may be confusing the two. But in general, the speech that I'm thinking about was a deeply felt, carefully crafted speech about why it would be wrong to reject the electors, the Biden electors, as the rioters were breaking in. I think this is what happened. It was kind of the handiwork of someone who cares about our system enough to admit defeat, for lack of a better term, because I am one of those people who 9 weeks ago I had my suspicions. I certainly think the election was tilted by some nefarious things. I can't stand mail-in voting. I hope it's only going to be to this level for this election. I think it's a disaster. I understand it for certain people, but I think to this level and the rules that were changed were a major problem. But when so many Republicans performed in a demagogic or disgraceful way, Senators Cruz and Hawley come to mind more than anyone. I think McConnell performed well. I wrote an article 2 months ago how I think he's been the most successful leader in the Senate, the Republican Senate, in my lifetime. And I think the numbers show in the last 4 years with 200, 300 something judges, and his crafty move in 2016 to reject Merrick Garland and get us to Neil Gorsuch, and of course, pushing ahead with Amy Coney Barrett, who will probably wind up being one of the best justices we've had. When most people, I don't know about you guys, when Ruth Bader Ginsburg died September 18, 19, I kind of just said to myself, well, there's an election in 6 weeks. We'll see what happens. And McConnell the next morning, and Trump gets credit for this too, they just pushed right ahead, and they had every legal right to do so.
Right. I mean, his term ends on January 20th, and yeah, absolutely. Okay. And Jeff, I think we already talked a little bit about McConnell's speech. How would you assess him as a leader within the party?
I think people underrate McConnell. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's true.
And even this thing that they used to call him Cocaine Mitch. I mean, this guy.
I love that, by the way.
Great nickname.
Well, but you know what? And AJ look at all the judgeships he pushed through. Okay. Harry Reid couldn't do that when he had a Democratic president. Okay. He's really done a lot. And the speech on last Wednesday proved that he cares about his country more than he cares about his political future.
That's important, I think. Yeah, an
you
important
know,
point you made.
And I the only other person I can say that about is Pence. Other than that, everybody was really doing politics when they should have been doing country.
Yep. AJ, right. You were just about to say something. Go ahead.
No, I think Pence and McConnell come out looking good. There are some senators who, well, there are some senators we didn't hear from at all. You know, Deb Fisher in Nebraska, where I used to live, you know, she didn't say anything, or, you know, and then there's some who were on the other extreme, who, you know, whether you agree with them or not, had strong views. Ben Sass, Mitt Romney, I suppose Collins and Murkowski, but Tim Scott, I think, was fine, you know, but generally speaking, Pence and McConnell, as far as leadership, come out looking great.
Yep.
And McConnell did give 2 speeches. Now that I think about it, I think there was one before and after the attack, or during and after, and I think they were both good, as I recall. So I think people should look those up. I think there's a lot of, it's very easy to criticize leadership. We've all done it, especially Senate and House leadership. Probably one of the hardest jobs in the country, along with, you know, maybe even as hard as being president in some way, when you think about the hundreds of people in the House or the 50 people in the Senate of differing views you have to gather together. If someone's going to call for the resignation of McConnell or of McCarthy, kind of like when you call for the resignation of a head coach of a football team or a basketball team, I'd like to know who you have in mind, because there's a lot of senators that I respect in the Republican Party, but off the top of my head, none come to mind in the Senate that could do the job McConnell did. Not one. And not Josh Hawley. I've heard the articles say Josh Hawley. I mean, even before last week, I went to Gone there. He's younger than I am. I mean, it's, for starters, he doesn't have much experience and isn't very mature. As far as the House, I could see Liz Cheney stepping in, but I know she's despised by a good amount of the party for various reasons. But I think that's the only person that comes to mind that could take over for McCarthy, other than Scalise, and that's a whole different discussion.
Well, yeah,
Also,
I mean,
Ed said before, McConnell doesn't want to be president.
No.
He wants to be majority leader. And that's important also.
Yeah, and Schumer doesn't want to be president. Most Senate leaders don't want to be president. I think Lyndon Johnson may have been one, but maybe he wasn't. I mean, but most don't.
Right.
Please
no, I
don't
agree.
mention Schumer. I ate today. It'll come back up.
Yeah, no, I understand. I'm just saying he has no interest in being
I
president.
live in New York.
All right, let's change the subject here, because I want to get to something that AJ wrote,
Yes.
which is interesting. It's a curious thing. You know, Joe Biden's got his cabinet picks, and, you know, for the most part, they're not surprises. They're not necessarily all going to get through either. I can almost guarantee you that Mayorkas and Becerra are not going to get through. There's not going to be 51 votes for either one of those guys. But AJ, you wrote about Joe Biden's CIA pick and about the fact that this is a guy who doesn't have any experience. I've got a thought about the experience question, but first off, I want you to go ahead and lay this issue out for us.
Well, I didn't know much about the gentleman until yesterday. I did about an hour or two of research and learned about him. And what came to my mind was, you know, he checks all the boxes as a career diplomat, and that's all well and good. And he's obviously left of center, and it's a Democrat president. So
This is a Democrat president, yeah. So
right. But, you know, I'm no expert in this. I did major in poli-sci, but as far as I know, when you're a career diplomat, that really is kind of the opposite job of being the head of the CIA or even working for the CIA. You're into diplomacy. You're into, like I wrote in the article, I'm just pulling it up, building bridges, establishing relationships, being on the global stage. And, I'm not into saying globalist, but yeah, get good travel, good food, maybe some women afterwards, probably a good time having this job, just saying. I'll take the job, but diplomats, they want to, just read from my article, they seek to establish trust, whereas secrecy is paramount for the intelligence agents working against those who are undermining the United States. So I would have liked to see someone with more of a security background, civilian, military, whatever it might be. And I wrote at the end, Tony Blinken, Secretary of State, he may not be that bad. We'll have to see. I'd like to think he's maybe pro-Israel. I know he's not. Okay. I know he's not he's for returning to the Iran deal, which is a big check against him.
Well, so is the new CIA guy.
Right. But this guy, if he's going to be a liberal and be against and be for the Iran deal, this guy Burns may have been better at Secretary of State. And there's a couple other people he's chosen that are odd for the job. Becerra, who we hope doesn't get through, Rhode Island governor for commerce, our friend, I have a friend who knows her, Jennifer Granholm, the CNN Berkeley beauty queen governor of Michigan, who's now running energy. I mean, it's almost like he threw darts at a board. I mean, Janet Yellen, okay, yeah, Treasury, makes sense. Lloyd Austin, defense, makes sense. But some of these picks, it's almost like, Ed Morrissey for HUD director. I don't know. I mean, some of these picks, it might well be anybody.
I'd love to see somebody nominate me for HUD director. I mean, I need directions to get there. I tried. You said it sounded like diplomat sounded like a pretty good job. I've been trying to get a diplomat job for 7 years. I keep offering to donate $5 because I understand that's how you get. Being a donor is how you get these jobs. I kept offering. I offered Obama $5. I offered Trump $5. Nobody's
ambassador jobs. That's how you get the ambassador jobs. I mean, ambassador to Micronesia or Ireland or some of the
Ireland.
Yeah,
I was willing to do it. I was willing to put myself out there on the terribly difficult job of being diplomat to Ireland or the Vatican. I was willing to take either one of those jobs.
Isn't that Newt or Newt's wife?
It was Newt's wife. Yeah, Callista Gingrich got
that one. He gave $10.
Yeah, he gave $10. So, I was outbid. I get it. That's fine. William Burns, I'll say this before I throw it to Jeff. Just on the experience issue, I would prefer to see somebody who either came in from the intelligence community, who knew it better, or somebody who has a military background, with somebody with more of a formal intelligence operation background. It doesn't necessarily have to be intelligence, but the military uses intelligence. Is obviously a deep, deep. What do you want to call it? Sort of tenterhooks into intelligence because you have to if you're in the military. I will say this in terms of experience. The one CIA director that I saw who had the least amount of experience going into the job was Leon Panetta. And he actually turned out to be pretty darn good in the position. He was so good, he ended up getting moved up to Secretary of Defense later on. And I was surprised because when Panetta got nominated, I said, this is ridiculous. All Leon Panetta's ever done is talk to intelligence guys as chief of staff of the White House. I mean, he's never done anything with intelligence. He didn't do anything with intelligence when he was in the House. But he actually turned out to be pretty good at the job. And so I did have to admit that turned out to be a pretty decent choice. And he was pretty good DOD, defense secretary too, for if you're going to have a Democratic administration,
Could be worse.
I was going to ask you, Jeff,
Jackson, he has no intelligence at all.
What do you think of Burns, though?
Oh.
He's just one more pro-Iran, anti-Israel person on the Biden team. Okay? You got him. You got Kerry. You got, let me think for a second.
Well, the ambassador, the UN ambassador, the lady.
The UN ambassador. The
Greenfield.
Right. You got Blinken. You got what was the woman who was the Rima Doden?
Yeah, you're talking about the NSA.
No, Rima Doden was the director of legislative affairs.
Okay.
The DNI, Avril Haines.
Haynes, yeah.
Okay, you go through it, you know, and you don't know me, AJ, but part of what I do is I'm a very huge advocate for Israel and Jewish causes, along with being conservative causes.
As we all should be.
And he's putting together a team of anti-Israel, anti-Semites for his
Do
administration.
you think it could be worse than Obama's team, though? I mean, because my hope is maybe I don't think anything could be worse than Barack Obama's foreign policy team.
Well, the difference was Obama himself is an anti-Semite. I don't think Biden is an anti-Semite.
Correct.
I think he's being pushed that way, anti-Israel, because the liberal wing of his party is very anti-Israel.
Yeah. And his vice president, enough said. I don't think she even knows where Israel is on the map, so that might be a problem.
Well, I think her husband told her.
Oh, that's right.
As they were celebrating Kwanzaa.
I think we're getting far afield here, Jeff. But yeah, okay.
No, but the thing is that, you know, she gave this whole speech about Israel, about Hanukkah, and got it all wrong. So if you don't know something, you should kind of shut up about it. And then the next week she gave a speech about Kwanzaa that was all wrong, and had a lot of lies in it. You know, so
well, I don't know what to tell you, but politicians tend to lie.
Well, misinformation.
Misremembering it.
Yeah, but you know, it's interesting because how the media keeps saying how many lies Trump made, and I once published a list of 1,800 lies that Obama made that no one covered. All politicians lie, of course.
All right.
That's how they get elected.
So we're just about at the end of the hour, and I want to find out what AJ's got coming up next at alphanewsmn.com, what alphanewsmn.com's got coming up next, and how people can catch up to alphanewsmn.com.
Oh, you didn't tell me you were going to ask that.
You gotta be prepared for self-promotion here. We're all about shameless self-promotion.
Alpha's we're expanding our video coverage. We've got a couple new writers and columnists. You know, the exciting part maybe is past the summer of love in Minneapolis, so to speak, and the election and the coronavirus hopefully is getting remedied slowly the next few months. I've got something I'm actually writing right now, probably for tomorrow, just totally different than anything we're talking about. But Andy Ngo, I think it's how it's pronounced, the very intrepid conservative, of Vietnamese origin, lives out in Portland, documents Antifa. He's got a book coming out in about 2 weeks. And as you'd expect, you can probably predict this if you haven't actually read about it yet. Antifa doesn't want it to be published. I mean,
right.
That's a kind way of putting it. They're harassing hippie liberal bookstores, you know, well-meaning people on their side, and yelling at them not to hold the book, not to put it on their website. You know, I don't know if they'll harass Amazon, but I want to document that a little bit because I've followed him for a while, and he's written at National Review and other pretty good websites. And I also think that, and I may write something about this, I'd like to see the presidency get smaller.
Me too.
I read an article a few weeks ago by Kevin Williamson, excellent writer, National Review, New York Post, about maybe Biden's the president to make the presidency smaller because he's weak and ineffectual and, you know, confused, what have you, and maybe him being more modest. Maybe, you know, if the folks on his left, the woke left, don't aggrandize the presidency for themselves, which is very likely, and if his vice president doesn't try to move in, maybe he can make it a little smaller. We've had 2 straight presidents who have been big personalities. W. Bush wasn't, but because of 9/11 and media coverage, he became a big personality. Clinton certainly was. So we've had 4 presidents in a row, you could argue. I'd like to see it smaller. I think we have a separation of powers, and for a reason. I think people should watch Schoolhouse Rock. I think Ben Sass has delivered some speeches mentioning this, and I think their, you know, civic education would make people understand that not everything revolves around the president in the United States. It shouldn't. And I think I'll write something on that. Hopefully Congress and can, you know, take a slightly bigger role and not outsource everything to the courts. And that way we don't have these huge fights every year or two, because, you know, Stephen Breyer's, he's faxing in the resignation right now. It's set for January 21st. He's pushing the button and he's out of there because he doesn't want to have what happened to RBG.
I don't know. I'm not so sure he's ready to get the golden parachute quite yet, but we'll see. And we're going to watch alphanewsmn.com for that. I think that Winston Churchill said, "Bad kings make for good policy, or bad kings make for good law," because in the British tradition, the law was meant to restrict royal prerogative in ever growing ways because of tyrannical abuse. I suspect
Kavanaugh is strict on separation of powers, and he might help that way.
Well, it really has to be Congress, though. Congress has to take back their authority. They've been punting for far too long because it's cheap and easy for them to punt to the courts or to punt to the executive, so they don't have to take tough votes. That's the problem. Until you get a Congress that wants to take on its responsibilities properly, you're going to continue to see that. And that's maybe after Trump and Obama, we'll get a Congress that actually understands that. It's so narrowly split right now, it would almost have to be a bipartisan effort to make that happen, which is the best way for it to happen.
Yeah.
So we'll see. All right. So that's what's coming up next for AJ. Now, AJ, you're not on Twitter, right? You mentioned that you're not really on social media.
No, I avoid it. I mean, I follow you on Twitter, and I follow important people, and I read Jeff. I've read your site for quite a while. Excellent work at the Lid.
Thank you.
So yeah, I mean, I follow news that way, but I don't feel the need to tweet.
You're a smart guy.
Yeah.
You're a smart guy, but you can also go to @AlphaNewsMN, which is the Twitter account for alphanewsmn.com. Jeff, what's coming up next for you at the Lid?
Well, I've been doing some research on Brandenburg versus Ohio, which is the Supreme Court ruling on what actually is inciting violence.
Yes. Very important case.
It is an important case, and it's an important case right now. But so in the next day or two, I'll be coming out with something about it. I still have to do some more research. But the first thing I'm going to do is go follow AJ's site, because I actually, until I met you, nice to meet you, I didn't know about it, believe it or not. Sorry. But I really enjoyed what you were saying today, and I want to read you more. So that's the first thing I'm going to do. And after that, probably eat dinner, because it's about that time. But I am doing some research on that. I'm trying to figure out, some people have sent me timelines, which I don't know if are real or not, but about how the people who left Trump's speech couldn't be the people who went into the Capitol. I don't know. All I know is, like I said, I have a friend whose son is part of the Capitol Police. And his shift started at the end of that, and he tells me it was scary as all shit. Well, not
Julio Rosas, Townhouse Julio Rosas was there on the scene. It was the same people. It was it just moved right down the mall into the Capitol.
Julio caused it, because wherever he goes, there's a riot.
Wherever Julio goes, a riot breaks out. I know. I mean, AJ,
he's a great reporter, but he causes riots.
AJ, you have to be careful.
I'm doing some research, and I will come up with whatever sounds like truth and real, because there's so much fake stuff going out right now.
Yeah, if you don't know this already, AJ, but when Julio is coming into the Twin Cities, you should tell your Alpha News MN crews to get ready, because a riot's about to break out. That's the impact that Julio Rosas has on cities. So there you go. All right.
Minneapolis, yep. Mm-hmm.
AJ Kaufman from alphanewsmn.com, Jeff Dunitz from lidblog.com. I'm Ed Morrissey. We're just going to go ahead and wrap up right here.
One last thing. What I said before, please, if you know anybody planning to do something violent on Inauguration Day, first talk them out of it. And if you can't talk them out of it, you know what? Tell the police, because we can't do any more of that. Violence is never an option.
Right. Well said.
Yeah. I would tell them to read Hot Air, read Alpha News, read Lid, and stay off the websites that are giving you misinformation or encouraging you to think things that aren't true. Not just the QAnons, but some of the other right-leaning sites that are, that have really given people false hope.
Yep.
And spread misinfo.
Yep, I think
Over,
that's
folks.
yeah. It's over. It's done. Just like Kevin McCarthy told Donald Trump yesterday morning, right?
What Bob Murphy did tell Met fans at 3 a.m. in the middle of an extra inning game when he said the damn thing is over.
Or like Ferris Bueller said at the end of Ferris Bueller's Day Off, "You're still here? Go home."
Right. Exactly.
Go home. All right, folks. We'll be back on Thursday. I think maybe with Dwayne, but if not, we'll figure out what we're going to do on Thursday. I want to thank AJ Kaufman from alphanewsmn.com. Be sure to read everything that he's doing and everything that Alpha News MN is doing, alphanewsmn.com. Jeff Dunitz from lidblog.com. He's on Twitter at YidWithLid. I want to thank the folks in our chat room, the Chatasar chat room, as well as the Facebook's the Facebook comments. Once again, they don't have the likes separated out, but Japanese Chick does say he plans to violently regurgitate.
Violently.
Too much. What was that, AJ?
Violently regurgitate, not just regurgitate.
Violently regurgitate. That is what's known as too much information. Too much information. All right, folks. I'll be back tomorrow afternoon with Cam Edwards for our VIP Gold Chat. So be sure to be around for that, and be sure to be around on Thursday, 4 p.m. Eastern Time, 3 p.m. Central, 1 on the left coast. Until then, have yourselves a great afternoon, and don't miss a minute of the Ed Morrissey Show. And there's AJ with the Mike Pence bobblehead.
Think of
there
Pence.
You go.
When you need to calm down, just think of Pence. He's soothing.
If you can't do that, then you've got to do the bobblefoot, the Larry Craig bobblefoot from the St. Paul Saints. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, AJ knows this one.
My
all right,
favorite
folks.
is Ahmed did terrorist, so I guess I'll leave it over there.
Yeah, you probably want to leave that one right there. Jeff Dunitz, lidblog.com, AJ Kaufman, alphanewsmn.com. Thanks for being with us. We'll talk to you later, folks.
Take care, folks.